Jimmy Haslam goes off on Jeudy after he disrespects Shedeur Sanders on Sideline. Jimmy Haslam had seen a lot in his years orbiting the turbulent universe of the Cleveland Browns, a franchise that seemed to manufacture storms even when the skies were otherwise clear, but nothing quite bristled inside him the way the scene did on a frigid Sunday afternoon when Jeudy, a player whose talent shimmered but whose temperament often tugged him toward the edge of controversy, brushed past Shedeur Sanders with a dismissive shake of the head, a smirk, and a few muttered words that carried more sting than substance, sparking a fuse inside the Browns owner that no one on the sideline had expected to witness. It was as though decades of frustrations, front office missteps, quarterback misadventures, ill-timed injuries, and the swirling media scrutiny that seemed to throttle the team's momentum whenever it built toward something resembling stability, coalesced into a single moment of primal protection over the rookie quarterback who had become not just a symbol of future hope, but a personal investment of pride for Haslam, for Coach Prime, for the entire organization that had tied its identity to Shedeur Sanders' rise, resilience, and unshakable composure under the blinding lights of both expectation and skepticism. And as Jeudy walked away with that cavalier air that so often teetered between confidence and carelessness, Haslam stepped forward with the charged energy of a man who had finally reached his limit, voice rising, hands slicing through the cold air, letting rip a string of frustrations wrapped in the sharpness of a reprimand that turned every head on the sideline and froze the moment into something that would be replayed endlessly on highlight shows, social media clips, and national debates about respect, leadership, and the shifting power dynamics inside a locker room struggling to merge star personalities with a shared purpose. It wasn't just about one player disrespecting another, not according to the layers beneath Haslam's eruption, because the Browns' season had been an emotional roller coaster vacillating between electrifying breakthroughs and gut-wrenching stumbles. The kind of season where every snap felt heavier than the one before, and Shedeur, still young enough to be learning the unspoken codes of NFL culture, yet seasoned enough by his father's teachings and his own collegiate battles to stand tall amid chaos, had become the calm eye in the center of a swirling storm. A quarterback who didn't flinch at pressure, didn't retaliate when provoked, and didn't let the noise seep into the clarity he needed to orchestrate the Browns' offense. So when Jeudy's dismissive gesture cut through that calm, piercing directly into the emotional core of a sideline already simmering with tension after a stalled second-quarter drive, the response inside Haslam was not merely anger but something closer to a protective instinct. The way a figurehead reacts when one of his most significant pillars is challenged. And in that instant, the Browns' owner's voice became a thunderclap, echoing across the field, catching the attention of coaches, players, media members, and even fans who weren't quite sure what had ignited the sudden confrontation, but could feel its weight reverberating like a tectonic shift inside the organization. Reality was that Shedeur Sanders brought more to Cleveland than just quarterbacking ability. He brought identity, intrigue, national attention, and a measured charisma shaped by years under the surveillance of cameras and critics, and Haslam, who had weathered too many seasons undermined by inconsistency and internal fractures, viewed the young quarterback not just as the future, but as the stabilizing force the Browns hadn't possessed since the fleeting sparks of past eras that never turned into sustained brilliance, which meant any disrespect toward Shedeur felt, in Haslam's eyes, like a threat to the equilibrium the team had finally, painstakingly begun to build. Jeudy, for his part, didn't seem to grasp the depth of that symbolism, because for him the moment was born of frustration. Frustration at not getting the ball, frustration at miscommunications with coaches, frustration at being overshadowed by the Sanders storyline that had enveloped the franchise like a wildfire, capturing the imagination of fans and critics alike. And so his offhand slight toward Shedeur wasn't calculated malice but an eruption of his own emotions that clashed disastrously with the sensitivity of a locker room increasingly orbiting around its quarterback's quiet leadership. Yet intent doesn't erase impact in the hyper-scrutinized crucible of the NFL, and as Haslam's words tumbled out in a heated cascade, Jeudy's expression shifted from indifference to irritation to something approaching bewilderment, because rarely had he been publicly confronted by someone of Haslam's stature, and even the players nearby, Nick Chubb watching on crutches as he continued his long, painful recovery. Amari Cooper, eyebrows raised. Myles Garrett, stoic but alert, recognized that this was not the typical sideline spat that fizzles out once the adrenaline settles, but something bigger, something exposing lingering fault lines inside the team's culture. Shedeur, meanwhile, stood still, shoulders relaxed, eyes calm behind his visor, radiating the same poise that had endeared him to coaches and teammates alike. And even as Haslam unleashed his fury, the young quarterback maintained his composure, not stepping forward, not retaliating, not even lifting a hand to diffuse the escalating energy, because he understood that sometimes silence speaks louder than confrontation, and his quiet presence in that chaotic moment only amplified the contrast between him and Jeudy, painting Shedeur as the mature anchor in a storm of adult egos. But what truly transformed the incident from a sideline argument into a turning point for the Browns was what followed when the game ended. When the stadium lights dimmed and the cameras stopped rolling, because Haslam, still simmering but aware of the optics and the organizational consequences, sought out coach Kevin Stefanski, the stoic architect attempting to steer the Browns through the turbulence of integrating young stars, recovering veterans, and big personality playmakers into a cohesive unit. And the conversation between owner and coach stretched long into the night, touching on the need for accountability, the importance of establishing boundaries, and the delicate balance of disciplining a star without fracturing the trust inside the locker room. And while Jeudy retreated to the shadows, fielding questions from reporters with clipped, frustrated answers, Shedeur faced the media with the same calm that had defined his tenure so far, brushing aside the controversy with phrases about focusing on football, respecting teammates, and learning from miscommunications. Yet even the reporters, seasoned enough to detect truth beneath polished media training, recognized the subtle strain in his voice, the slight tightening of his jaw, the unspoken weight of being the focal point of a franchise and the gravitational center around which all emotion now revolved. As the days passed, whispers spread across the league. Analysts debated the incident from every conceivable angle, some framing Jeudy as a volatile presence jeopardizing team chemistry, others criticizing Haslam for overstepping into on-field discipline, and still others applauding the owner for protecting his quarterback and setting a firm tone for what behavior would and wouldn't be tolerated in a team still forging its identity around Shedeur Sanders. But the truth, as is often the case in the NFL, was layered and complex, shaped by ego, expectation, pressure, and the invisible emotional threads that tie a franchise's hopes to the shoulders of a single young quarterback. Privately, Shedeur met with Jeudy days later, not in a confrontational manner but with a quiet maturity that belied his age, speaking calmly about respect, communication, and the need to keep frustrations internal rather than letting them spill into public view. And though the conversation didn't instantly transform their relationship, it created a fissure through which mutual understanding could grow, a small but significant step toward the unity coach Stefanski had desperately tried to build since training camp. What no one could dispute, however, was the impact the incident had on Haslam, who emerged from it with a renewed determination to shape the Browns' culture in a way that aligned with Shedeur's values: work ethic, resilience, mutual respect. The weeks that followed, subtle changes appeared throughout the organization, from the tone of team meetings to the expectations placed on veterans, to the renewed emphasis on accountability. And as the Browns clawed their way through the final stretch of the season, grappling with injuries, inconsistency, and the ever-present weight of external scrutiny, the incident with Jeudy lingered as both a warning and a catalyst, a reminder that in the brutal, emotional world of the NFL, respect is not merely etiquette but currency, and protecting the team's emotional core is paramount. Meanwhile, national media continued to revisit the moment, dissecting Haslam's eruption with the type of forensic obsession reserved for controversies involving high-profile owners and rising superstar quarterbacks, and each retelling seemed to amplify the stakes, fueling debates about player empowerment, front office intervention, and the modern evolution of leadership dynamics in professional sports. But inside the Browns facility, the narrative was quieter, more introspective, shaped not by pundits seeking clicks but by individuals trying to move forward, to rebuild trust, to channel emotional volatility into competitive fire rather than interpersonal conflict. And through it all, Shedeur remained steady, his unspoken leadership setting the tone for players who had once questioned whether someone so young could command a locker room filled with veterans. And gradually, the question shifted from whether he could lead to how high he could lift the franchise. As the season wound to its dramatic conclusion, punctuated by narrow wins, heartbreaking losses, and flashes of brilliance that hinted at a brighter future, the memory of Jeudy's sideline slight and Haslam's explosive reaction slowly transformed from a headline into an inflection point, a moment that clarified not only the emotional hierarchy within the team, but also the standard of respect required to support the young quarterback entrusted with carrying the franchise forward. And in retrospect, players later admitted that the confrontation, while chaotic and uncomfortable in the moment, ultimately forced uncomfortable truths into the open. Truths about accountability, ego, and the delicate chemistry that determines whether a team ascends toward greatness or falls apart under pressure. And by the time the Browns entered the offseason, holding exit meetings and evaluating every aspect of the roster, one thing had become undeniably clear. Shedeur Sanders had become more than just the quarterback. He had become the emotional compass of the franchise, and Jimmy Haslam's fiery defense of him, however unfiltered, had sent a message reverberating through every corner of the organization that their future would be built on protecting not only the young star's body, but his dignity, his leadership, and the intangible qualities that made him the center of Cleveland's hopes. Jeudy, whose season had been a collage of big plays, frustrating inconsistencies, and moments of emotional volatility, entered the offseason facing his own reckoning, reflecting on how one impulsive moment had triggered a chain reaction that exposed the consequences of unchecked frustration. And while his relationship with Haslam remained cool but professional, his connection with Shedeur slowly evolved into something resembling respect, driven less by words and more by the quarterback's unwavering consistency, calm under pressure, and ability to forgive without forgetting. And as the months passed, as training camp loomed on the horizon, as storylines shifted and the media cycle churned forward, the infamous confrontation remained a quiet thread woven into the Browns' narrative, an episode that captured the emotional complexities of building a team in the modern NFL, where every action is magnified, every word dissected, and every player, coach, and owner is navigating the thin line between passion and chaos. And yet, when viewed through the lens of history, through the slow, stabilizing climb of a franchise long burdened by instability, it became clear that Haslam's eruption, Jeudy's misstep, and Shedeur's poised silence had all played a part in shaping the Browns' identity, forging a tougher, more unified core that could one day look back on that cold Sunday afternoon not as a moment of dysfunction, but as the spark that forced the organization to redefine who it wanted to be, what standards it would uphold, and how fiercely it would protect the young quarterback, around whom its future had begun to crystallize. And even now, as the league continues to evolve and the Browns continue their pursuit of relevance, consistency, and greatness, the memory of that sideline flashpoint remains a testament to an undeniable truth. In Cleveland, respect is earned, dignity is defended, and when it comes to Shedeur Sanders, the franchise will stand its ground, no matter who crosses the line.